Hello and welcome to the Comic Crush YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing something a bit different because we're not going to be talking about comics. This is the Real Crush special. As you know, we did a sort of very brief series of the Real Crush, which is our kind of non-comic book film show last year. Hope to be doing a longer series this year, which is kind of still being recorded and sort of planned and stuff like that. But before that starts, we're going to do a series of specials on the Indiana Jones quartet, leading us into a review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So this first episode is going to be on Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't want to do this one alone, of course. As always, I'm bringing a friend with me, and the friend I'm bringing is Mr. Keith Isles. Hello, Keith.
Hey, all right. Got my gear all set up.
I love your setup.
Set dressing.
And I now know what happened to that idol.
There we go. Yes. Yeah, Belloc didn't have it for long.
No. Who'd have thought you'd have been a better archaeologist than Indiana Jones?
Wow, I'm trying. I've even looked at that. I've even got the stubble today. You know.
Nice. It's good that you've come in character. Just to briefly explain what we're going to be doing, because it is going to be a bit different. We're not doing a film review because there's been hundreds of reviews of this film. Lots of us have seen it and love it. I've never met anyone who doesn't like Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's good. It's probably just the company we keep. And I know these films are a kind of a shared passion for us as well, Keith. Being men of a certain age, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Definitely formative experiences of our youth.
You know what though? I was thinking about this the other day, and is annoyed as I am about being old and and filmmaking being more accessible these days, and all of that good stuff. I did sort of think to myself, I'm really happy to have lived the era of film and television that I did, because seriously, well, we'll get into it, but rewatching this, I still get goosebumps now, years later, even though I've seen the film hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times. I still get goosebumps and get that feeling, and it takes me back to when I was a kid. Love it.
Oh, fantastic! I'm really glad that's still kind of a factor for you in looking at these, because it is hard to kind of keep that excitement up for films that you've seen many times, and I assume we've seen these many times. What we are going to be doing is a bit different. So rather than just review or recap the film, Keith and I have decided to each pick a particular sequence that we love from Raiders of the Lost Ark. We'll be doing the same again next week for Temple of Doom, the following week for Last Crusade, and then actually quite soon after, because we'll be running out of number of weeks then, we'll be doing Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, all in this same format. We're going to hopefully... Keith's not looking forward to that one. We're going to hopefully kind of give you some info that maybe you didn't know before, maybe look at the scenes in a different way. But it's going to be quite an informal chat about specifically those scenes and then the film series as a whole. And then in about 4 weeks, what should hopefully happen is Keith and I will reconvene and we'll talk about Dial of Destiny, which I am really looking forward to. So remember, you can find me at the Comic Crush, as it says there, on Insta or Twitter. You can also catch up with me on Facebook. Just find the Comic Crush page there. If you like and follow that, I'd be really grateful. And don't forget to give us a share and subscribe here. Another channel that you should share and subscribe is Home Media Minefield, which you can find on YouTube. You can also follow Keith at Home Media Mine on Twitter. On Instagram, your Home Media...
It's Home Media Minefield everywhere except for bloody Twitter, which I don't like or understand anyway. So, yeah, try me on all the other ones.
Don't show your age like this, Keith. Come on. Of course you understand Twitter. Very simple. But
Instagram's the preferred, I think. Yeah.
You should definitely give Keith's channel a look. He does home media unboxings, Blu-ray, DVD, things like that. He also has live streams and discussions about some of the great pop culture, film and TV milestones of the last sort of 4 or 5 decades, and you should be looking at those. Those are fantastic. They're real deep dives, and they're the kind of thing you can really kind of listen to and enjoy for long periods. If you've got, you're doing something at home, you need something really good to listen to, I advise you to go onto this channel. It's great.
Or you're having trouble sleeping and need something to send you off.
No, at all. Some of your discussions are quite lively, actually, Keith. I've been on them when they got lively. So
yes.
Most recently, we had a very lively discussion about The Mandalorian, a sort of 3-season recap of that with Simon Aitken and Graham. What is Graham's last name?
Graham Williams.
Graham Williams. I'm sorry, Graham. But yeah, should check that out. Anyway, we've been doing this for 6 minutes. It means we've only got about 40 minutes left to get this done.
Impossible.
Let's go. We're going to start with one of my favourite film scenes, which is the Nepal bar sequence and fist fight from Raiders of the Lost Ark. I adore this scene. I really, really love it. I know it's a strange one to like because it doesn't become an action scene until sort of halfway through. So it starts at about 23 minutes into the picture, and it's 10 minutes of the movie. There's some wonderful stuff in it right from the get-go. We have the Sherpa and Karen Allen's character, Marion Ravenwood, engaging in a drinking competition, down in shots. They've already got sort of 30 glasses in front of them each. They look like they're neck and neck, shot for shot. And it then appears that Marion is having trouble kind of taking a last shot. The Sherpa then takes his, and in one of the best bits of comic timing I've ever seen, he slowly collapses after taking his drink. And I always forget. I always think there's going to be one more exchange of shots than there actually is. Because it's only like the economy of storytelling of Spielberg, you only see the exchange once, right? Mm-hmm. They only take a shot each.
Yeah.
In the thing.
But all the empty glasses.
It's all there. It's all there, and it's all. And if you take a look at the documentary on one of the Blu-ray releases, which I did before looking at this, you can see them working those sequences out, and they're very much done on the fly. And it's funny because in your sequence later on, it really kicks off with the sentence, "I don't know, I'm making this up as I go." And that is very much the way the film feels put together. And then the drinking scene ends. Marion's won a load of money, which is something that's important to her. She's trying to get out of Nepal, trying to get back to the US. And what I love is how all these little things play into the next moments that come along. Mm-hmm. Because you get that great image. And this is one of my favorite images in cinema, which is this one that we've already taken a look at, where Indiana Jones is there, and it's just his shadow, and there he is, larger than life. Which I mean, the amount of stuff you're getting in that one shot is fantastic.
It's taken straight out of film noir, isn't it? Basically,
absolutely. Yeah. And of course the Western.
And the Western.
You can't, and we know, Westerns lead to film noir. And there is some very direct correlations between those two genres. And I think, as you point out, this bridges the gap nicely. And also time-wise, in terms of the American history, this would have sat between the actual kind of Western period and the kind of more civilized period. But it's a great moment, and even her look, it's kind of like head, hands on head. What a calamity! But of course, she's got the two cold glasses there, because you see her throw those down and smash them, and it's a lovely moment. And shadows, these big looming shadows, happen quite a lot throughout the Indiana Jones series. And there's a favorite of mine actually later on in one of the other movies that we'll get to, hopefully, when we talk about that movie. But I just adore that moment. And we start getting into this kind of, as I said, the wonderful kind of economy of storytelling, where we're giving all the information we need for that moment and the relationship, which is they've had an affair at some point that perhaps was a bit ill-advised. Perhaps Marion was a bit seduced by Indiana Jones. As she said, I was young and I was in love, and it was wrong, and you knew it. But he also speaks to her kind of quite, I don't know, cunning and knowing, which is he says, no, you knew what you were doing. And so there is this kind of push and pull of who was the seducer and who was the seductee. And it is really almost as romantic as the film gets. Because when we look at these films, we talk about romance and all that kind of stuff. It's a romance for a period of time and and film history almost. They're not staggeringly romantic. And there's certainly kind of sexual tension and stuff like that in there, but they're not romantic in the way that perhaps later action films would be forced to be, because to get everyone in, to make sure you ensnare the entire audience, the four quadrants, there's got to be a romance, there's got to be this, there's got to be that, and here the romance is very much kind of cast off whenever you don't need it. Like he never does anything for love, I think, until the later movies of any kind,
Okay, yeah.
I think he likes his job and he enjoys what he does, but he doesn't do, it's not like, oh, I'm doing this for the love of a woman. He's got bigger fish to fry. So this also establishes that he needs, as mentioned in one of the previous scenes, he needs the headpiece of the Staff of Ra, which will be used in the map room later on to pinpoint where, from that very sequence.
This was actually a birthday gift from Simon Aitken, who you mentioned.
Oh, nice, yeah.
A good friend, and he was my co-host for 5 years on the Movie Heaven, Movie Hell podcast, which is about 200 episodes, I think. But yes, he kindly got me the map room indie with the Staff of Ra there. Nice. So I just thought I'd mention that and put it in the back.
No, thank you for showing it. But yeah, we get, he wants this piece. He offers her $3,000 to kind of hand it over, and she tells him come back tomorrow. He leaves, and it's revealed that she's been wearing that piece as a medallion the entire time. Couple of things here. First, when she first sees him, she greets him with this very Hawksian punch in the face. And by Hawksian, I mean kind of, she's like the women in Howard Hawks movies.
Yes.
Which means she's not without feeling and emotion, but she's actually very, very tough and can hold her own. And the only time we really see Marion scared in this sequence is once Tote and his men come in. Because they're very serious characters.
Yeah. Interestingly, as well, with that whole thing, I think in the edit, from what I can gather, the whole thing was retooled slightly. The reason I say that is in the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark documentary, and also the comic book adaptation, the Marvel comic book adaptation, there is a scene there where they kiss as well. So even though she punches him in the face, that at some point in that scene, they exchange a kiss, which of course is not in the movie that we end up seeing. So yeah, I don't know whether that was, that was clearly some sort of deleted scene, but I guess they sort of retooled it to maybe take some of that romantic stuff, as you mentioned, out of it, perhaps.
And it is best left until the very end of the movie, a kiss, because it feels like more of a payoff.
Yeah.
And it's much more satisfying that the actual romance doesn't really seem to start until the end of the picture.
Exactly.
And you know, we move from this kind of bristled reunion into this action sequence, which I think it's very interesting to look at the film as just a group of sequences, because you really get the flow of the filmmaker at work when you look at those, and the speed and style, which the whole thing is 10 minutes. As I said, it's 10 minutes long. And that he accomplishes a ton in that time in terms of moving not in terms of moving the story forward necessarily, because some of the stuff is saved for later. I mean, the gunfight is fantastic in terms of the use of a small space and the chaos that can ensue in a small space, because it's not a huge room. And in fact, they never really show you a ton of like master shots, which would give you an idea of how small that space is. But it is a small space. And what I really loved about the sequence, and I only really noticed this watching it today again, is that the thing that everyone is after is right there in the middle of the room, and no one knows but Marion. And I love that. Yeah. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And we also get some lovely tiny little moments in it, such as the bar being set on fire as Indy's head is kind of pressed against it, and the thing runs down in a line. You see the fire coming closer, and he says to Marion, you know, whiskey. I love that. I've always loved that line reading. I think it's fantastic, and he hits the guy on the head with it.
And I love the way she takes another shot from the bullet hole. You know, she just gets her mouth under it and has a quick tog on it before leaping into action. Yeah.
And you can tell it's sort of 100% proof stuff in that place, because it lights up very quickly, which is a sign of a high alcohol content. And there's also like there's some real kind of, not gore, but there's a great moment where the guy is kind of shot in the head, which actually looks like the old. Have you ever heard about the Robert Rodriguez thing, the guacamole gun? Where to simulate shots, they'll shoot and it will just spray blood and whatever over the person.
Yes.
And that shot always reminds me of that. But it's actually quite a gory shot earlier on in the picture.
Yeah. There's a proper squib and everything that they use for that. Yeah. Right
in his noggin. And you also get that wonderful moment where Indy is dead center in the frame, and the guy's got the gun trained on him. And I think it's a beautifully framed shot, because he stops like it is a comic book.
Yeah.
And then there's the gunshot, and he kind of looks, and he hasn't been shot. It's Marion shooting from behind. And I always thought in that moment, when the guy falls and you kind of come to that close up on her face, or that sort of medium shot on her face, she was quite scared. But I realized today she actually isn't. She actually is really kind of angry, and it's something I only kind of noticed.
That's her bar up in flames.
Yeah. I don't think she's worried about the bar though. She's more worried about the cash, because the money goes up in flames, as she reminds him, you know, now I'm your goddamn partner until I get my 5,000 back. But we also crucially have Top reaching for the headpiece to the staff of Ra, and burning the facsimile of it into the palm of his hand, which of course is how they get their incorrectly sized piece later on. there is something I want to bring up about that,
Mhm.
which is there is that kind of thing where people say that Indiana Jones really has no effect on the story of this film. That
Oh,
if he's not,
yeah, was that
if
is that the Friends thing? No, the Big Bang Theory
yeah,
thing,
in that
isn't
he, well, it's a kind of thing that's been circulating for many a year, which is if he just wasn't there, then it wouldn't really matter. But I mean, he
It
does
would
have
to
an
me, because we
yeah,
wouldn't have this
you wouldn't have to
amazing
film.
film. So,
But you wouldn't. I mean, if in one sense he finds the Ark for the Nazis,
Mhm.
but in another
Yeah.
sense he finds the Ark. So,
But I mean, that's what's so great about it is
mm,
the you know the cat and mouse of it all. I mean, obviously, when we get on to you know my scene, it's you know, yes, they've seized the Ark, but he gets it back, and then you
mm,
know they seize it again, and again. It's that's the wonderful thing with this story. It's so kinetic in the
yeah,
fact that it's just, you know, it's a globe trotting chase basically, for this ultimate power, you know, at a very crucial time in our real history.
yeah,
So I
completely.
just think everything about it is, I
And
seriously, it's just a wonderful
it's a
movie.
perfect movie. It really is. And interesting enough, there is some basis for Hitler. Like he was running around the world trying to find mystical objects like that. That is a thing.
They put it in
Um,
the MCU as well, haven't they?
yeah. But that is a thing. It is a thing. He was trying to. I think most crucially, he was looking for what I believe was called the Spear of Destiny, or the Spear of Longinus, which is the spear that supposedly pierced Christ's body at the
Mhm.
crucifixion. But there is some basis for him, you know, doing this.
So that line, Hitler's a nut on the
Yeah.
subject, he's obsessed with the occult and whatever, is actually a perfectly justified line. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've got to talk about Karen Allen because a terrific
Wonderful.
actress who I felt I didn't see enough of in movies. Just absolutely beautiful and just perfect for this film. I believe they. Oh, sorry, gone too far there. I believe they looked at Sean Young originally at one point for this.
Oh, right.
But she was considered too young. And interestingly enough,
No
you know, a
fun.
couple of years later, she was in Blade Runner with Harrison Ford. But a brilliant actor, and you know, I was always thrilled to see her return for Crystal Skull. And of course, Ronald Lacey as Tot or Tote. I never know how to pronounce it. But he apparently had quit acting and become an agent at the time, and was kind of lured back into acting to play this staggeringly memorable character, who was a real kind of nervy little creep.
Yes.
And funny enough, I was looking at the scene today just before the truck chase where they're all kind of standing above the Well of Souls, and when they throw Marion in, he's kind of walking away giggling, and it's just like it's a brilliant bit of acting. Like I don't know if he did that himself or if that was something he was asked to do, but it's a really nice little touch.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic actor. And I think for me, the scene really shows a wonderful economy of action, direction, lighting, and I think it's everything that Spielberg does really well. You know, you've got the famous oneer at the beginning because the whole drinking game is one shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like 4 close-ups or 6 or 8 close-ups and a medium and a wide, all in one kind of setup, which I think he does to get through the shooting day faster, because I'm sure he said that on the movie he decided that he didn't want to do more than 10 setups a day.
Right.
So yeah, a wonderful scene, and I really love it. Is there anything else you want to add about this particular scene, Keith?
No, I mean, a good choice. It's, you know, there are all the scenes in this film are great, so it's always hard to pick one. But yeah, I mean, just a trivia thing that many people probably know anyway. But the last Sherpa that he beats up at the end of that is actually Pat Roach, who has a double role in this because he is also the bald mechanic at the plane fight sequence as well. So he gets killed twice by Indy in one film, and
doesn't he?
Sadly, is no longer with us. But
no, but doesn't he appear right up to like Last Crusade? Isn't he? Like,
yeah, I know he's the guy that in Temple of Doom he's the one that gets flattened through the crushing machine in the you know, mine at the end. So he's in that for sure. I'm just trying to think who he is in Last Crusade.
I thought he had dual roles in Temple of Doom as well. I thought it became quite a tradition to put him into two parts. And and just great. As the guy who's with Sapito at the beginning, so not Alfred Molina, the other guy, he is the one-eyed sort of guy with the monkey. In the kind of Egypt sequences. So, Kate, I mean, now I want to hear you on the truck scene.
Well, I mean, choosing a scene from this film is so difficult because they're all good, and this one I've chosen follows an excellent scene that we've just mentioned. You know, with the fight at the you know, the plane hijack basically and stuff in the airfield. But yeah, this is on physical media, because obviously I've got to talk about physical media. This is chapter 23, which is called The Desert Chase. And it starts at 1 hour 21 minutes into the movie and goes on till 1 hour 29 minutes in the movie. So, and apparently, I mean, to sort of counter your make it up as they go along thing, you know, this sequence was incredibly meticulously planned, and it took 5 weeks to film for 6 minutes of on-screen action. So and it involved over 50 stunts with more than at least 13 stuntmen, I think maybe 15 stuntmen involved in the whole thing. So I mean, yeah, I don't know whether you're able to are you able to put my slides there?
I can. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, just give a bit of context. So for me, the reason Raiders of the Lost Ark is such a special film for me is because it's the film where obviously I was already obsessed with Star Wars and you know, that sort of thing, you know, being a child when all that came out. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, before I even saw the film, because I didn't see it until a re-release, it was something that I watched specials about on television, and I knew a lot about and was already starting to become interested in how films were made. So really, as you know, my whole long history is I went to film school and all of this sort of stuff. And I would say that Raiders of the Lost Ark was probably the catalyst for that for me. You know, it was quite an important film. I think I've lost you, Paul.
No, you haven't. Don't worry.
I am.
I just it felt like you needed a moment there, so I was just bringing you up.
Sorry, I'd lost you there. I thought you suddenly everything disappeared except
big monologue, Keith. Come on.
No. Yeah. So it was. You were trying to give me a moment. You were trying to give me my close-up. I appreciate it. Well,
you've got no appreciation for my on-set directing.
Skills, yeah. So the thing that really got me sort of into this was a documentary that I videotaped when I was a kid and watched over and over. And it was called Great Movie Stunts, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was what was on that image. And it was funny because it was around a time when stunt work was a really sort of popular thing. You had movies like The Stunt Man and Hooper starring Burt Reynolds. On TV, you had The Fall Guy starring Lee Majors. So as soon as I saw this documentary was coming up about stunts and stuff, I was interested. And this was when I first saw behind the scenes on a film. Obviously, I already knew Harrison Ford because of Han Solo and whatever. And, you know, they talked about this being by the same people that made Jaws and Star Wars and all of that sort of thing. But one of the things they focused very much on was the desert chase, or the truck chase, as they referred to it in that documentary. And it was funny, actually, because as well as educating me about filmmaking, that documentary gave me a lot of education about film history. You know, at that point in my life, I'd only seen, you know, what was on TV, what my mum and dad were watching. There were some TV shows I was into. Obviously, Star Wars and Superman on the big screen had been, you know, my first cinematic experiences and all of this sort of thing. But I hadn't really sort of dug into any more than that because obviously I hadn't lived long enough by that point. And it was funny because that documentary went into things like, it went right the way back to Buster Keaton and Douglas Fairbanks doing stunts in their early movies. So it talked about the whole silent era. It also talked about the film serials and the B movies of the 40s and 50s, which had inspired Indiana Jones or Raiders of the Lost Ark. It first introduced me to Zorro. It showed scenes from Zorro because that's where the bullwhip was influenced from. And of course, when we got to this truck chase sequence, it introduced me to John Ford, because this stunt was first done in his film Stagecoach, starring John Wayne from the 1930s. And obviously that inspired Kurosawa and all sorts of things, right? But that stunt was essentially, they repeated it again in Zorro. I think it was Zorro's Fighting Legion, with Zorro climbing back up onto the stagecoach. And they used that as the basis for the truck chase, where they were replacing a horse and cart with a 5-ton truck. And it's quite interesting because you see Spielberg and second unit director Mickey Moore and stunt double Terry Leonard and stunt coordinator Glenn Randall, or working this out and preparing this whole sequence. And it shows, you know, how the stunts were planned. It shows things like them, you know, digging a groove in the desert road to allow enough clearance for Terry Leonard, who was Indiana at that point, to go under the truck. It showed Harrison Ford getting padded up to do some close-ups, dragging behind the truck. And it just showed you all the elements of how this was made. Now, as I said, I watched it again for this. It's only, you know, like I said, a 8-minute sequence, including the, you know, the line about I'm making it up as I go along and all of this. And I got the goosebumps just watching it, because it's everything. It's not just the stunts and the photography, but it's John Williams' score during this. Everything about it is so wonderfully executed and planned and shot. And I just think it's exciting. It still gets my heart racing. I just think it's an exhilarating sequence that follows many other wonderful sequences. So yeah, I just really wanted, when you said pick a scene, this one seemed the logical one for me to pick, because as I said, I had studied it from the documentaries long before I even saw the film. And when I saw the film, obviously, you know, there were things that were cut out of the chase in the documentary. So there were all these moments and bits that I hadn't seen when I went and saw it as a kid on the big screen, and I was, you know, totally wowed by it. But yeah, I look at Raiders of the Lost Ark as being that film. people have said to me, if Star Wars was the film that got me interested in movies, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark was the one that got me interested in filmmaking. And I just loved, again, talking about this era that we grew up in. I love the fact that the same producers and creatives, as well as the star of this film, were the same people as doing Star Wars, but, you know, but a completely different type of adventure. And most of what I'd seen at that point had either been, you know, sci-fi stuff in another world, or predicting the future or whatever, or contemporary, you know, crime shows and action shows, or westerns that you know, my dad had shown me. So this was quite nice because, like you said, the era where this is set was something completely different. This just pre-war era. And you know, seeing different parts of the world and all this, having it's like a James Bond adventure, a globe-trotting adventure, but in the 1930s. And you know, with this interesting archaeologist character. I mean, I didn't even know, you know, it taught me what an archaeologist was, because I didn't even know that word, I think, at the time. And you know, yeah, for me, everything about this film is fantastic. But if I had to only pick one scene to talk about, as you asked me, this desert chase sequence, which, as I said, is well, 6 to 8 minutes long, depending on where you hit start and stop. But
because it's interesting, because for me it stops when they pull into, when the Nazis pull into the little Egyptian village. Yes. For me, that's the end.
Belloc throws the melon at the driver. And what I also like, you say, when you say about Spielberg and his choosing his shots and his economy of storytelling, you know, when you know, Salah comes in to see that, you know, Indy and Marion survived the plane explosion. You know, that's what I mean. It's literally nonstop. Indy is still wiping the blood away from his fight with the mechanic, with the Pat Roach character. Yeah, he's still wiping the blood away. And he goes, you know, if you want the Ark, it's been loaded on a truck to Cairo. And he goes, truck? What truck? And they set up everything. You see Belloc and Tot and everything get into the lead car. You see the Ark in the crate loaded onto the truck. You see the armored cars behind and the motorcycle and sidecar and all of that, you know, gearing up, and all the men checking their guns. And it sets it up perfectly. And you can see, because Indy rides up on the horse on the ridge, you get the geography. You get to see that they're heading along the you know, the edge of the desert into part of the jungling land parts of it. And you know, you see how many vehicles are there and how many troops are there. Everything is so nicely set up. And then you get the classic, you know, the horse riding up next to the vehicle. I think I put a few slides with some behind the scenes bits and pieces as well there, where you can, you know, that you got to see in that documentary the stunt people and the camera crew, and, as I said, Mickey Moore, the second unit director, and all the 35mm cameras and everything there set up with the rig next to the truck and everything. And it was just, yeah, it's just so interesting to see how that was put together. They showed you the storyboards in that documentary as well. You know, they really went into some detail about the actual filmmaking process and the history of stunts and action in cinema, and that's what I loved about it.
I think that's lovely to hear, actually, because I had no idea that was the film that kind of got you in all the years I've known you, because, you know, we've known each other for about, God, it feels like a good decade now at least. Yeah, and I had no idea that was the film that kind of set you off on sort of filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got, obviously this is the Steelbook, Blu-ray and 4K, right, which is what I watched this on recently. I've done unboxings and stuff for this on the channel, but this poster, when I was at film school, my room, this poster and the Star Wars poster were each side, you know, of my small room, my small dorm that I had, and they were really the inspiration, you know, that, and I would say, you know, Superman the movie, and obviously Bond films, and all of this sort of stuff. But which is again what Indiana Jones was born from, which we'll get into in a couple of movies' time, I'm sure. But yeah, it's such a special film, and when people say what's your favorite film, it's almost like an impossible question to answer. But if I'm really pushed to answer, I usually say Raiders of the Lost Ark. Usually the answer to that question.
Ah, that's lovely. That's
Yeah,
lovely. I mean, it is a terrific sequence, and I don't think I can add anything really to what you've said, because it just is a really kind of beautifully done sequence, and it's a sequence that looks like it hurts, which I think is another thing you see in the Raiders movies.
yeah.
And definitely in the
I mean, Indy in this, he gets thrown for a window. He breaks a Mercedes sign. He goes under a truck, gets shot in the arm. He gets punched God knows how many times. I mean, yeah, it's and you see it. You see blood on the set, you know, on bits of the vehicle, and I mean the amount of people that, you know, the amount of characters that die in that sequence.
It's funny,
you know.
As with the earlier scene where I always forget how many drinks it is that they take before the Sherpa collapses, I always forget that one of the cars here gets knocked off the cliff.
Yes,
you see it just tumble.
Yeah,
over.
Well, I mean, again, it's mixing everything, because they used they had obviously tons of stunt work and you know, photography tricks and you know, on set special effects and John Williams' amazing score and all this sort of thing. But then they also used some models and some matte paintings for things like that, like the Jeep going off the cliff and all of that sort of stuff. So again, it's using all of the technology that was available at the time. You know, obviously this was a fairly high budget movie back in the day, but they were using all of those things to tell this story. And you know, I just think this, you know, this is filmmaking at its best for me. I mean, everything, the story, the characters, the editing, the you know, the motion of this whole piece. I just find it really exciting. And again, my good friend Ian Diaz, he bought me this cap one Christmas, because obviously that's the cap that Spielberg and Lucas were wearing on set and stuff, you know, back in the day with the Raiders logo. So yeah, it's thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about a scene. And
thank you for coming on.
This was a really good idea to push it down to just one scene or one or two scenes, because
I think otherwise we would still be doing this. We'd be a 24-hour long.
we would have probably got to the boulder by now, right?
Yeah. It's again so many great scenes. So I'm sure anyone watching this has seen it, Raiders of the Lost Ark, but obviously do take a look. And it is on Disney Plus from the 31st of May. They've got the entire series. Plus, excitingly for me, because I've never seen this, young Indiana Jones is apparently also going to be on Disney Plus. I don't know if that's correct. I hope it is. I hope it's not just a rumor, but I've been told that from the 31st they will also have the Young Indiana Jones series, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into that, because I've never seen it.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No, never.
Yeah, it's got I mean, some of it was good, some of it not so good. It was kind of designed to be a somewhat educational about history and geography and all that sort of stuff as well. But what they did something weird. So I'm interested in what versions they're going to have on Disney, because the original, when it was originally released, it was like an hour-long episode, or 50-minute episode. But the beginning and end of each episode dealt with an old Indy in contemporary times, which I guess was the late 80s or early 90s or whatever when this was done. and then it would sort of flash back. He would talk about he at that point he was a cantankerous old man with an eye patch and all of this sort of thing, and it would flash back to his youth, you know, with him as a like a 12-year-old or a 21-year-old, with River Phoenix supposed to have been in between the two, if you like.
Right.
And what they did is they then re-edited them into like 90-minute adventures, and they cut all of the old indie contemporary stuff out completely, and then they released them as a series of TV movies like that. So it's interesting. I'll be interested to know what version
who plays the old indie?
Oh, somebody Hall, George Hall, or
right.
Hold on a second, I can't remember. It's Sean Patrick Flannery plays young Indiana Jones. Hold on a second. Young Indiana Jones. Oh, 1992 is when this show premiered. And hold on a second, let me just get the. Oh yeah, George Hall, I was right, played old Indy, and Sean Patrick Flannery played Indiana Jones sort of as an early 20s, I guess, and Corey Carrier played Indiana Jones about sort of 12, I think it was.
Right.
I'm just having a look, and if they give actual ages that they're playing them. Old Indy, Henry Jones. Yeah, it doesn't give what ages they were supposed to be. But the idea, I think, it was set up because of the River Phoenix sequence in Last Crusade. And they sort of did this with some of it being pre that and some of it being post that.
Okay, that's interesting. I very much look forward to it. Watch it. So from 30th SMA, the complete Indiana Jones on Disney Plus. I'm sure you'll be tuning into that. Be interesting to see them. That's it from us for this week. We'll be back next week for Temple of Doom, which may or may not be your favorite Indiana Jones film. I've certainly got some feelings about it, and we'll discuss those, I'm sure. Okay. And then the following week, we should be here for Last Crusade, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Keith's favorite.
There's a story to all of them for me.
Well, I look forward to hearing those. Keith, thank you so much for coming on this. Home Media Minefield. Check out Keith's channel. It's a great channel. Do like, share, and subscribe that. And this, please. It does really help with the YouTube algorithm. And please do take a look at the Comic Crush website. Yes, we mostly deal in comics. We also do some movie stuff too. There's the Patreon there, which helps support me in doing this, because this is kind of basically my full-time thing. Do join that. There's plenty of stuff and sort of back matter you can take a look at. Loads of extra videos and things we've done. We'll try and get some extra videos in for this. Actually, there's a little plan I've got to discuss with Keith a bit later on for doing some extra stuff for this. Okay. Yeah, and I hope you'll join us next week for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all my patrons who help keep me going, and to all of you out there. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Fortune and glory.
I'm more. It's not the years, but the mileage. But okay. We're out here. See you soon.